All of this, everything we know, is extremely improbable. The fact that you and your loved ones have crossed paths on a random cosmic timeline to both be alive and together at any point in time is astonishing. Your ancestors and their ancestors have passed down life to 7,500 generations of modern humans, meaning you are the direct descendant of at least 15,000 people who met, fell in love, had affairs, struggled desperately, and ultimately raised or at least gave birth to everyone in your family tree. My family recently recovered an ancient photograph from the late 1890s of my great-great-grandparents. They're sitting side by side, staring straight at the camera, and neither is smiling. His face is guarded and solemn, like he was photographed against his will, while hers is gentler, more sad than tense. And yet, despite the fact that only 4 generations separate us, I know absolutely nothing about my grandfather's grandparents, except that they were somewhat religious and lived in a small town near Minsk in modern-day Belarus. Finding this photograph not only spurred a sense of connection with my great-great-grandparents, but with every ancestor whose face I will never see, whose story I will never know. There's so much you don't know about every person in your bloodline, so many unanswered questions. The birth of a new child seems to obscure the oldest generation on file, and you can only truly know who your ancestors were for about 4 or 5 generations before names are lost and everything just becomes a blur. This is how it's been for thousands of years. Family legends remembered and forgotten until everything before a certain year just turns into one giant, unanswerable question mark. And eventually you have no record or knowledge of anyone that came before your great-great-grandmother, and the complex stories of your 15,000 kin are silenced, their book forever closed. One day, if it hasn't happened already, you may be fortunate enough to pass on stories about yourself and your family to your kin. But maybe you won't have to. Maybe in 400 years from now, your lineage will be able to search your name on some evolved version of the internet and find a grainy video of you doing the ice bucket challenge, along with an archive of every ridiculous post you ever made on social media. Or perhaps technology doesn't get that far, and you will be as much a mystery to your descendants as your ancestors are to you. And your lineage won't be able to do anything except look up at the stars and wonder what you were like. Either way, all of this musing represents a fixation on our biological families, ancestors that share portions of our genetic makeup. This is probably the most enticing group to think about, as they obviously have the most relevance in contributing to who we are and what we're like. But an argument can be made that this emphasis on our local family blinds us from the true reality that every human who's ever lived is part of our larger extended one, all 107 billion of them. In this context, it almost seems crude to only fixate on the group of humans whose saliva slightly resembles our own, when the human experience has been shared across the millennia by 107 billion others who led lives just as complicated, miraculous, confusing, tragic, and beautiful as our own.